So welcome to part 2 of our series, Intro to Curriculum Mapping with Janet Hale. I'd like to give a quick introduction to our incredible speaker for this series. Janet is the founder and president of Curriculum Decisions. She specializes in curriculum mapping, curriculum design, and standards literacy and alignment. She has taught in elementary, secondary, and special education classrooms. And she has also worked with curriculum, instruction, and assessment leadership for over 30 years. Janet has written several books published by AASCD and Corwin Press, with 2 focusing on curriculum mapping, as seen here with these 2 lovely book covers. Please give a warm welcome to Janet Hale.
Hello, everybody.
And this series is brought to you by Chalk. Chalk is a planning and analytics platform that enables K-12 schools and districts to develop a cohesive, standards-aligned map for curriculum and instruction. Chalk supports millions of educators and thousands of schools throughout the world. To learn more about Chalk or to get support on your curriculum initiatives, please visit chalk.com/demo. Now, without further ado, I'll hand things off to Janet to get things started.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sarah and Keenan. I really am excited about what we're going to be focusing on today. So just a little bit of a recap. We do have a part 1 to this webinar series. And so part 1, really we're focusing on the building the capacity. And again, by this definition, what I spent a lot of time was focusing on getting our vocabulary, our understanding of what mapping is, what it's not, really figured out so that as we're communicating with our stakeholders, we're doing so with accuracy. So that was the goal for our first sessions in part 1. So today, as I kind of mentioned last time, we were working sort of from the mountaintop experience. Well, I think again, because so many of us are still in that kind of beginning stage. Oh, can you go back for me one, Keenan? Since so many of us are still in that beginning or intermediate stage, part 2 is still somewhat of a mountaintop experience, but this time, as you can kind of see from the photo, we're going to use a binocular, if you will, and get kind of a closer up look to some things, especially within the idea of quality maps, quality map units, really, and the elements that go on them, and how do we really do that well. And I like to think of it as, let's be proactive rather than reactive. So if you are, as many of you are, starting, it's great to have those conversations before you dive too deep and then have to kind of backpedal and make some changes. We're also going to explore, and I literally mean just explore, the 7-step review process. I'm going to show you that, of how I use it for prioritizing standards, which is kind of a very popular kind of mapping that I'm doing right now, especially with the lost learning that's been taking place. And then I'll talk a little bit more at the end, like I did last time, about sort of some thoughts for implementation planning. So with that said, can we go back one more, Keenan? Yep. My mouse is happy. We just want to start by laying the foundation that mapping is a verb. It's not a noun. And so that while today we are going to definitely get to the level of using our binoculars to look at maps, to me, maps are the eventual evidence of all the verbing. So to me, what excites me and what I get super stoked about, as they say, is really the conversations and the dialogues that take place that eventually lead to something in writing. And as I've said, previously, some of that can begin on a Google Doc environment just to kind of get started. But eventually you're going to want to use a platform and have the whole experience, if you will, in an evidence form that is very much systemic. And so we want to make sure that we realize it's all about the inging, but you will end up having maps as evidence of that inging. So with that said, today we're going to be focusing on, I'm going backwards for some reason. I'll go forward. I can do this one. So today we're going to be focusing again sort of within 4 realms. The first is differentiating between interalignment and intra-alignment. And when I talk about intra-alignment, it'll be very much married, if you will, to the second portion, which is really determining those quality protocols. I'll then talk about exploring that 7-step review process and then contemplating a second order change. And I just want to say up front, we need to understand that curriculum mapping is not a first order change. It's not a quick change or a quick fix. It's really meant to sort of change how you do your educational work and business. So we want to make sure we're looking at it from that particular perspective. So to get started, let's really focus on differentiating between interalignment and intra. So we're going to start with inter. And I'm going to preface this by saying my specialty as a curriculum mapping consultant is I specialize in systemic mapping. The idea that it's our entire aspen grove, how can we better be connected as one system versus kind of the oak grove mentality, which is like we've got these strong trees, but the root systems, they might tickle a little bit, but they're not interconnected. And so I'm coming from this idea that we want to have interalignment. We want our root system really talking to each other in a way that's beneficial for our students and of course for our teachers as well. So since we're having a mountaintop experience, I know some of you maybe have done this before, as I have, and that is go on a mountain bike. So on a mountain bike, you'll see quite often as you see kind of a row of these mountain bikes, you'll notice that there is an order sort of to how they might be looking. So for my little analogy here, kind of think of it as we're going from the lower grades to the upper grades, but yet there is somewhat of an order or how it looks. Because if you have teachers doing their mapping, as we talked about previously, totally from this idea of, hey, I'm doing it individually, I put in what I want. Remember, I warned you that one of the roadblocks is they have a tendency to write it as a teacher or a contractor and not as an architect. And so what we want to do is we want to start off with our protocols for writing units of study in map form, not lesson plans. We want to be thinking about it systemically and what is it going to look like when we're sort of riding these mountain bikes, if you will, down the mountain. So one place that I like to work a lot with the interalignment is this idea of, we know that our map units are going to have lots of elements to it. I like to start with content because content is, hey, what do we want our students to know? So if we can really focus this idea systemically on what we want them to know and start thinking about that from a way that it builds from that lowest grade level you have to the highest grade level. And I know some of you have said like, well, wait, we started from up and went down. Again, I find personally, it works better to go bottom up, but your bottom could be, it starts in 6th grade. Maybe that's when you start your world languages and then it goes up to 12. But I do find from experience, it works better from bottom up. So I want us to look at it from content. Now, Sarah, get ready, because I'm going to ask them to put their thoughts, if they will, into the chat for a moment. We're going to talk about content for a minute, and we're going to look at a little bit of work that I have done. This is from a school district I've done that's in social studies. So everyone, it doesn't matter what you teach or what you're responsible for. Social studies is social studies, and we can all take a kind of a quick look at that. Now, one thing within social studies we all have to deal with is the substrand of economics. Economics usually falls under a social studies realm. Now, I'm going to show you this. I'm not going to say anything except, what do you glean? Let's say you're a reader of a map and you're starting to look at content in some series of units at different grades. So Sarah, what I'm going to ask everybody to do is just kind of jot down, like, what do they see visually here? What do they notice? And then what do they think maybe it's really telling the reader the way that it is done here? So let's just see what kind of pops up in the chat, and we'll see what people have to say. Like, what does this mean? Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, content dealing with economics. But what's really going on? What is it conveying?
Someone says vertical progression of content, spiraling, getting more advanced as the grades go up, spiraling of some topics and introduction of new materials. Here's one you'll like. Blue highlights the new skills and content that is building on previous black text skills and content. Vertical alignment.
Cool, yeah. So I think everybody pretty much is in agreement that you can see this vertical alignment, like without even having to guess at it. Now, again, I do think some people are attending that have worked with me before because of a few things that they have talked about, and that's great. And what I want us to notice on the really big picture is that for my particular style, so I want to make sure I also say a little caveat here. Curriculum mapping consultants don't all do this the same way. this is my style. And so somebody else's style as a consultant might be different. And one thing I loved about when we did our curriculum mapping academies years ago with Heidi, we've done a lot in the early 2000s. What I loved about our academies is lots of curriculum mapping consultants were there. And she actually had times with consultant slots. So you could actually attend, meet lots of different consultants, and really figure out which one's the right fit for us for what we are trying to do with curriculum mapping. So I do not want to move on without saying there's not a right way or a wrong way, but it's a way that we want to make sure works for us. And so this is my style, and I'm not saying it has to be somebody else's style, but I want to make sure that you understand what is interalignment and how can you make this happen. So first of all, what I also hope you notice is it's kind of like, in some ways, with a wink, old-fashioned outlining. Remember Roman numeral outlining? You know, we're starting with this like bigger focus, and then it seems to get narrowed down by these little double hyphens and bullets. So what I want you to first understand, in sort of the language I use, is where you see the colons, those are your noun phrases. This idea of what's our big area that we're focusing on. So economics. So what this should tell you right off the bat is, all right, for our learners, economics does start in kindergarten, but no work with systems, economic systems, that doesn't start in grade 2. How do we know that? Well, that comes into the second part where I start using color. And where I use color is blue. Blue equals new learning, which somebody mentioned in the chat. So how did this get birthed? I wish I could take credit. I can't. I would probably say about 10 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, I was in a school district working with some teachers. And we were thinking systemically. And one teacher said, well, how are we going to show that it's new? Because especially in English language arts, there's a lot that sort of, if you will, repeats itself. You just go with a deeper text. So how are we going to know it's really new? Well, another teacher said, blue equals new. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. So that's what we decided to do. So, but now here's something I want you to realize. In this conversation I have with these teachers, we're like, what do we do with kindergarten or your lowest grade level? And they all decided, and there was actually a kindergarten teachers present. They were like, everything would be blue. Let's just make it black for kindergarten, because we sort of knew everything's new unless there's a preschool. And then grade 1 is where we start the blue. So that's where now you see all of a sudden in grade 2, you do have an entire section under economic systems blue, because that was never asked of previous grade levels. But if you look above, you can see there's a real nuance across the grade levels. Now, how do we get this content? Remember, the content and the skills are birthed from those standards codes, but you don't see the codes here. Just like my room, as you can see, it's decorated for my doggy world. But there's codes behind the walls, if you will, that say the room must have these specific requirements to be able to be built. So just like that, here is something that's letting you know it's standards based, but yet it's letting you know specifically what we've decided is the focus for the students. So there's a social studies example. Let's take a moment thinking about what you learned from this, and let's look at it from English language arts, which I have said before, little roadblock. English language arts is the hardest discipline to map. So if you have choice, I personally recommend that you wait on English language arts, start with mathematics and some of the others that are a little bit easier to map. They're a little bit more discrete. But here's a good example of a noun phrase that I like to use a lot with ELA, which is reading literature genre characteristics. What's going on here? Because we can now, we're already up to 7th, 8th, 9th. What's happening here is students may well have read the genre of a science fiction prior to 7th grade. They might have done it in 5th grade, but they've never looked at the genre for its own characteristics. They were reading it for looking at who's the main characters, what's probably the plot and how it advances, but not about the genre. Like, for example, in the primary grades, quite often a genre that they learn about is fairy tales. And what's very unique about fairy tales, for example, there's always going to be a 3, a 7, or a 12 in the genre. And you're like, what? Okay, so think about 3. the Three Little Bears, you've got the clock striking 12 at midnight. So it's really learning about the genre. So in this particular district, we actually looked at all the possible genres, and we figured out from K on up which ones we're going to be focused on at which grade levels. So a great example here too is the drama genre, because according to Common Core, and these happen to be based on Common Core, which most states are based on that too, that the ancillary documents talk about that from K through 5, it's really about readers' theater. And that really, when you hit middle school, is when you really talk about plays. And so if you were to see our 6th grade one in blue, it would have said 1-act play. But now in 7th grade, we change it to multiple. That's what's new, not the play itself. And then you'll notice in the 8th grade, it kind of stays the same. And then really 9th grade is just a matter of more complex plays. But notice what's happening in 9th grade, which is something that we really feel like miss a lot in today's world. And that's the whole idea of a screenplay. Because again, who doesn't watch TV and movies and everything on Netflix nowadays? So it's this whole idea that they need to have that. So this is this idea, again, of systemic, kind of from an English language arts view. So now let's go ahead and look at this next from a little bit of a math view. But now, again, take a moment, talk to yourself, have a great conversation, put something in the chat if you want. This is mathematics, grade 3 and grade 4, a snippet of it from fractions. Again, you're a brand new teacher to the district, or you're doing, for example, maybe an audit of the curriculum, which happens a lot for those of you who have schools or districts that get accredited. They want to see the curriculum. So maybe you're getting audited. But what is this conveying to the reader without the map writers, creators even have to be there? So take a second, kind of take that in, and then I'll make a couple little notes with this one. Okay, hopefully you had a good conversation with yourself or a neighbor that's sitting next to you. But here, the first thing you should have been aware of is, oh, guess what? Fractions are brand new in grade 3, which again, if you know Common Core standards, they sort of tickle the idea of partitioning in the previous grades, but grade 3 is the first year we have true fraction standards. So that's why everything's blue. So remember, only in kindergarten do we not do the blue because everything would be blue, but this is saying, hey, brand new. Now you'll notice for the noun phrases, if you will, we've got a couple things going on here. We've got this idea of fraction representation, fraction equivalence, and fraction comparisons. But if you notice, the fractions equivalents move on to the next grade, and so do the comparisons. But what's really new is they never had fraction computation before, nor have they had decimals. So again, teachers love this because it lets them know right away what's new, because new translates in their mind as a contractor, the how we're going to teach this, they're going to need more time. Where if it's all black, or like if you look at the top, okay, we're going to have a few more denominators, but they'll have the understanding. That's going to need less instructional time. So on the contractor side, this helps tremendously. So what we want to do is be thinking about what can we focus on with interalignment. This is mapping, without a doubt, that prepares us for the map itself. And it becomes so much easier when we've done this ahead of time. So want us to now be kind of thinking about this from the idea of, oops, can you go back one for me, Keenan? How would this even look if we wanted to do a comparison in the platform that we're using, like Chalk? So Keenan, can you kind of give them an idea of that? With this one, I use social studies, again, types of maps for an example, but can you show them how, like, if they were mapping and using Chalk, how would I find these and put them together to make sure we do have that? Because some of you might've been doing it all in black font, and you now want to make that a new piece of what you're doing. How can we find what we're looking for quickly? So could you show them that quick for me? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So we'll just toggle over here and we have our kind of sample environment, and we'll just actually be using that example of those social studies. So within Chalk, what it allows you to do is once you've actually created all your maps at any point in time, if you want to pull them side by side, and in this example, we're going to kind of keep building on what Janet was going through and kind of looking at K through 3. But I do want to note it is possible to really look at this from any angle. So once you've got more content established in there, it really opens up a lot of doors for you. So to get started, we're just going to pick the first map we want to look at. And then we're just looking for that compare map option because we do want to just compare them directly to each other. And then that'll bring us to our view where we're able to see multiple maps at once. So to add whatever ones we want, we go into add a curriculum map. And like I was saying earlier, you can really pick whatever you want. You can use the search here and find the ones you want to find to pull them up side by side. And for now, we're just going to add grades 1, 2, and 3. And we can see them all listed here. And we can change the order if we want to. And then click compare when we're done. And then at a first glance, we'll just see a high level overview of each one. So we can see within our grade K, we have all of our different units throughout the year. Same with grade 1s, 2, and 3. And then if we want to dive into these, we can actually just click into the units themselves and jump straight to the content. So in this case, what we're going to try and do is just line up our content across from grades kindergarten through to grade 3 and really see what those look like side by side, so that we can kind of then have those conversations or take this view and save it so we can kind of refer back to it later or share it with our colleagues very quickly and easily. So you can do a lot of different things from this perspective of looking through the maps.
Right. So Keenan, while you have this up, again, if some of you have already started mapping, because some of you are at the intermediate level, but you've never thought about the inter kind of alignment, this is a great way to pull up what you do have and kind of begin there and say, all right, we don't use noun phrases. Like this, obviously types of maps is one of the noun phrases. I always tell my people colonoscopies are good to have, right? Good for health. Colonoscopies. So your noun phrases, notice there's a colon at the end. Get it? So your noun phrase is good for you, right? So you can work with your teachers to figure out what could our noun phrases be? What could we organize this around if you're someone that already does have maps and units of study. If not, then start right from the beginning with the standards and work on those intra-alignments before actually going to the maps themselves. So you can do it either way. So thanks for showing that, Keenan. I really appreciate it. And hopefully this has opened up some thoughts. I don't know, you might have some things already in the Q&A going on there, Sarah, but let's go ahead and do a little bit of a time. Remember, benchmark is a benchmark trail where we kind of have this trail that's going like this. And the benchmark is sitting, the bench is on top where we can kind of have a reflection time. We can kind of say, where have we been? Where are we going? So take a moment of, I thought I knew, now I know, now I wonder. And so go ahead and just pop your thoughts into the chat. And then if you want to, Sarah, then go ahead and, whoops, going backwards. I need to kind of go forward there. There we go. Yeah, so can you go back one for us, Keenan? Just pop in your chat, like the whole concept, if you will, of interalignment and how that could be a benefit to your mapping experience. So if anything coming in, Sarah, any questions up to now?
Yep, they're just starting to pop in now.
Okay.
Someone says, holy cow, I didn't realize we could compare maps to facilitate interalignment, and the Brill font concept is brilliant.
Cool. Okay, great.
Someone says, now I know that color coding is a very important part in interalignment and to show new learning. Someone else says, I thought it might be too simple. Now I know it's more complex. Now I wonder how to marry it. So it's sort of hitting all 3 points there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll take 1 or 2 more that you see and then we'll move on.
Sure. Someone again just referring to the color coding that they know it's a new content in a different color is a good idea. Mm-hmm. I think that sort of summarizes what we've got if we want to keep going ahead.
Okay. So, and again, just as a reminder, up to this point in time, everyone, we've talked about interalignment, the interalignment of all the different maps and all the different grade levels, and even if you want, all the different disciplines. Now we're going to look very specifically at intra-alignment. And the difference is intra-alignment is within one unit of study. So this is where you start thinking about the protocols for how are we going to ask our teachers or administrators, whomever is actually being the map creator, what are our protocols for when we're writing things? And so this kind of marries into the quality idea, because we want whatever we lay that foundation for, or we're going to do a little bit of a reboot, we want to make sure that we've got a clear idea of what quality is and why. So it's going to kind of be marrying these two. So with that said, I want to talk for just a moment about what I really mean when, oh, going backwards for some reason. Oh, here we go. It's really going backwards, Keenan. Can you like pop
Here,
over?
sorry, let me grab it.
Slide. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit though about, yeah, next one. There you go. About this idea of, okay, we've got it kind of aligned vertically. And some of you said you really like my idea about blue equals new learning vertically. But then again, now we're talking about the within. Okay, it keeps going back, Keenan. I'm going to have you just, if you don't mind, just click for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
thank you.
can.
So, so in an actual unit of study, so remember a curriculum map. Oh, you went forward. I didn't touch anything. My hands are up here.
Here we go. Is this
nope.
good?
There you go. Yeah. So if you want to just click it real quick for what's on here. Okay. So a curriculum map, everyone, is the map is this idea of the path run in small steps. Remember that means curriculum. So a curriculum map is one course, could be 1 year, could be a semester, but it's a series of units of study that are in that course or that grade level. So the intra-alignment is the quality unit of study within each one. So what, Keenan, if you click on just the very next thing will pop up, this is really where, to me, the rubber, no pun intended, meets the road when it comes to this mountain biking. And that is that, what does quality mean? So if my teachers are asking, what do you mean by quality? Quality to me means the reader of the units of study in a map do not need the creator of that map present to accurately interpret the student's learning expectations. If they can't figure it out with them there, then to me, it hasn't met quality. Now I'm going to say that along with one other piece. I also want them to be able to see the intra-alignment. They know what goes with what in the unit, again, without the map creator there. So with our next slide, I want us to just kind of realize that, again, for today's time, I can only show you so much. So just click one more time, Keenan, and you'll see the kind of the areas I'm going to focus on are standards, saying that, remember, standards, I kind of shared this with you before. I like them at the bottom of the unit of study, because just like in my room, there's standards, there's codes that say this room has to be this way, but you don't see it. You see all the cute dog stuff, right? You see what's in the room, but of course it has to be aligned to what's allowed by the standards. Then we talked about the sort of 3 non-negotiables in a map are your content, what the students must know, skills, what the students cognitively do, and then the assessments that measure that. And so then, of course, that all needs to be aligned to the standard. So we're really focusing on the learning aspects right now. So with that said, I want us to realize here's a great way to get that started, using a conversation starter and some kind of a scale, if you will, of what's acceptable or not. Because right now, I want to just be sure you realize I'm not going to sit here and say, you must have it done this way or it's not quality. You have to decide what's right for your district. I'm going to give you a quality scale based on what I find, and in my work, that intra-alignment becomes very apparent using this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to provide this scale that I'm going to be using today. So it goes from 1 to 5. This will be provided for you after today's webinar. And also when you go look at the webinar, if you're watching this a year later, it will be there available for you. Then you'll have to compare that to either your units that you've already created, which I know some of you printed those out today, or you can use units that you're using as just sort of a base to say, hey, let's look at these. They're out there on the web. Let's look at them as a base and figure out what's right for us. So I'll tell you right now before we begin, for me on my scale, level 1 and level 2 are kind of examples of not quality intra-alignment, which is what I'm focusing on. Level 3 and on start with that. And then it gets a little bit more into the detail you can put into a map unit. So what we're going to do, and Keenan, to go ahead and show the next one because it's going to get you ready for what I'm going to have you do, is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you examples of level 1 through level 5. I'm going to start by level 1 to level 3, and then we'll have a little bit of a benchmark trail moment, let you kind of process it. And then I'll show you a level 4 and a level 5. And again, not about being right or wrong, but again, if I'm really working on that intra-alignment, I want to make sure that we get to that level on our scale where it really shows it, which for me is level 3. So Keenan, can you go ahead and show an example of sort of that side by side where we're going to see level 1's bullets from the scale, and
So
then
switch over here.
And this will be an example of what I consider to be a level 1 map unit. So we have a unit here. We're going to do math. The unit is called data displays. That's what the unit's called. And I always think the unit is important because think of it as you've got kind of a library shelf, and on the library shelf, you've got your units in it. And that spine that says the title of what's there is very important. That should give us a good bit of information about what we're going to get inside. So it's kind of like, to me, like having a blank white binder, and now you're going to go ahead and put on the spine what's going to be placed inside that binder. So why is this a level 1 when it comes to intra-alignment as well as detail? So I know everyone can read, but this is new for you. So I'm going to go through this one pretty closely as far as the bullets go, and then I won't do it quite as much with the remainder. But this unit of study does have information. So if the teachers are told, oh, put in your content, put in your skills, put in your assessments, tell us what standards, they did follow the direction, but the information is minimal. And it does not convey clear learning expectations. Also, all of my colleagues that work with me in this world will tell you content. Note that content is noun-based. It's this idea of what they have to know, where skills are verb-based. So you don't really want to see verbs in content unless it's a very unique kind of a verb. So you'll notice here it says ask questions. That's cognitively what you're saying the student's going to do. So that really shouldn't be living here. Maybe questioning, which is sort of a verb, but it's not really, if you know meanings of it in the English language, it really is not the actual verb. It's a form of a noun. So again, kind of problems there. Now, notice the second bullet says there's no intra-alignment coding. Nothing is going to connect the content, the skills, the assessments, or the standards. You'd have to guess. So Keenan, if you kind of scroll down just a little bit so we can see content and skills together. So think about it. I'm brand new to the school. Here's my map unit. Okay, well, all right, what goes with what? I mean, I can kind of guess. I mean, they both say ask question, but I do not want my teachers or my readers to have to guess at that. And now if you scroll down a little farther, Keenan, you're going to say, all right, great. How about some assessments? Well, the assessments, again, are very broad. And so I want to make one little note that I do have in my level 1. If teachers haven't had quality assessment training, this is a problem that comes up. Teacher observations are not assessments. That is a form of evaluation. What is the teacher observing? What you're observing would be the actual assessment. So teacher observations tells me that there might be some need for assessment training and assessment versus evaluation. But again, you'll notice nothing's aligned with anything. And the very bottom, of course, will be the standards, because again, we have those codes there. So just kind of show that at the bottom there. So now we have all of our map elements have been filled out, but there's nothing connecting it. And there's a lot of guesswork. So with that said, let's look at one that I would put in a level 2. So a level 2, you're going to see, yep, there's going to be some more information on a level 2, right? It's getting a little bit now, it's questioning, collecting. So we've got the verbs out. There's no more verbs sitting in the content. And also, if you kind of do a little bit at the beginning of the skills, Keenan, you'll notice that, wow, a lot more detail. Like Create questions that require answers that can be organized in a number sequence. Oh, on a scaled line plot. Okay, so, all right, now, and it lets me know what fractions are involved. So a teacher has a much better idea of what the learning expectations are. The other piece is what I call a partial intra-alignment happening. They've used ABC. Now, there are some consultants out there, and there's nothing wrong with it. They actually don't use ABCs. They use the bullets and they color it. They'll color different sections, different colors. Nothing wrong with that. My problem for my style is blue means new. And so for me, it's very difficult to get a bunch of different colors going and then try to also like, well, it's supposed to be green because it's connected here, but it needs to be blue, right? So for me, it works better to do an alphabet coding. So alphabet, so now again, we can kind of, oh, A's and B's and C's. And if you scroll down, Keenan, just kind of scroll down slowly. Vanna White, thank you, Vanna. Scroll down and you can kind of see, oh, here's the A's. Here's a lot more detail though than we saw in a level 1. Now here's the catch. If we scroll down a little bit more to our assessments, we still have a problem where no more teacher observation, but again, they just bulleted them. So we still do not know what assessments measured what skills. We have to guess at that. And we, again, have no standards alignment for what's in here. So with that said, drum roll, please. Let's go to level 3. And this is where I feel like it could get the quality stamp of, yep, someone not present, right? The creator of this doesn't need to be present. Somebody can read this and make sense of it. So you'll notice my scale says that level 3 greatly increases the accurate interpretation. Notice even the unit name. So Sarah, get ready. We'll see if somebody pops this in. Notice your unit name even tells us, whoa, it's scaled. This is all like, that's going to end up, I can tell you right now, if we were doing blue, although we're not doing blue at this level, scaled is new. This is new at this grade level. They weren't doing scaled in previous grades, right? So it's great for me to know that. But then notice it says D/OA/NF. What's up with that? So talk to yourself, have a great conversation, or pop into the chat. What do you think that might mean? Scale data, comparisons, and word problems, but yet it has something before this colon. We got a colonoscopy happening again. What's going on here? It's not a noun phrase, I can tell you that. So what do you think that might be? I'll give you a second to kind of think about that. Anybody popping anything in, Sarah? Are they all thinking in their heads? Oh, domain. Someone said domain.
Domains,
that one.
yes.
Okay.
Thinking hard.
Thinking hard. Yep. I'll see if anybody else pops anything else in there.
Oh, still thinking.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and domains. I use the word strands, but I think domains is the same idea. So what this is saying to, again, all they're seeing is the units kind of lined up on a shelf, if you will. Oh, this unit is focusing on standards from the data and measurement domain or strand, from operations and algebraic thinking and number fractions. So already someone's going, oh, okay. So again, we're already having an idea of what's going to be happening right from the get-go. So now you'll notice, probably no surprise, the content here is done with noun phrases. Remember, colonoscopies are good for you. And what I find for these, again, I've done this a lot with lots of districts, and I always share kind of what's worked before, but kind of this idea that when you're dealing with data, it's data collection, data representation, and data analysis. Those are really the big 3. So that's why you see those 3 there as the noun phrases. Do you want to collapse that one for a second, Keenan? We'll just jump to skills. Notice what happens now, though. Here's the intra-alignment that starts happening, not content to skill, but skills to assessments, because now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the letters connect the content skill for intra-alignment, and the numbers we're going to see in a minute connect that to the actual assessments. But before we go any farther, notice it also, and this is so important, these skills are aligned to standards, because after every skill, you see the code for that particular standard. So these are obviously measurement and data ones. B1 is a combination of measurement and data and the number with fractions. You can kind of see that there's no guesswork. Every skill we have is aligned to our standards. So if you want to collapse that one just for a second there, Keenan, so we can see assessments, you can collapse skills just for a second. Now we're looking at assessments, and notice, there's alignment. We know exactly what standards go with what skills. Therefore, we can now say if these skills go with that assessment, we can even include those. So what Keenan did is he put these in to chalk, where now you'll notice every single assessment has its own little box or field, as you call it. So those standards are right there. You can use that for some data analysis within your system. But most importantly, I don't have to guess. I know A2, A4, A6 go with categorical data collection inquiry test. And I've even included, is it formative? Is it summative? So stop there for a minute, Keenan. I'll show you one more thing, everybody. Notice I see some M's. Some have M's, some don't. My scale will tell you that an M means on a collaborative level map. So we've talked about an essential map is used in a larger district or a diocese. And then a consensus map is a one school site collaborative map. When you see M's, when you develop that, and then everybody is now using this on their own personal teaching level, that's saying that's mandatory. These particular ones are mandatory. The other ones, you can use them, not use them, you can make up your own, but it's giving some latitude to what's actually allowed. So now the standards, while they're still at the bottom, if you want to see specifically what they say, everything is intra-aligned. All those spokes of that wheel of our mountain bike are now connected, and we can really get rocking and rolling with the teaching side. So with that said, why don't we pop over and give everybody a little chance to kind of process a level 1, a level 2, and trying to get to a level 3. Now you'll notice I don't have any blue yet, because there are some places that maybe don't want to do that interalignment piece, or to start with that. So I'm not saying it's not a good map if you don't. What's quality? And so quality is all about that intra-alignment and enough detail. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes to kind of process what I've shared, because I do want to show you the level 4 and 5. So we're back to that little next bench on our trail. What did you know about intra-alignment, or thought you knew? What do you now know, and what do you wonder? And then we'll have you put that in the chat. So I'll give you a chance to process and then jot down your chat thoughts.
Lots to think about for sure.
I know. Oh yeah. Take your time. Especially if you're brand new, Sarah, like, if we have a lot of beginners, intermediates, or even explorations, they're like, whoa. So totally get that. I need to sleep on this. I can see that.
Yes, that first answer right there. I know I need to sleep on the concept of quality to process it.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely a lot to process.
Yep. That's why we want that benchmark trail time where we can just kind of sit back or sleep on it.
Someone says intra-alignment connects the detailed components of the map, where inter-alignment connects the overarching work across the grade level.
Okay, so let's make sure. Intra is definitely across the grade level, and intra is within, and inter is across. So I just want to make sure I heard that right too. So inter is the interalignment in one unit, and intra, listen to me. Intra is in one unit and inter is across. The reason I got kind of muffled there is somebody did say, I was looking at the chat, OA versus NF. So I just going to repeat that real quickly. So what you create in a unit title, you can also connect that to your standards as well by saying kind of where is this learning coming from in your standards. So the D stood for the data and measurement strand. The OA stands for Operation Algebraic Thinking /NF. And what that also meant, in order, most of the standards were coming from data and measurement. Some were coming from OA, and a little less or equal were coming from NF. So the first one was always the majority. And again, that's assuming that our person asking the question, they may or may not use the Common Core standards. So it's whatever your standards call your strands or domains is what you'd use. But that fit that particular example because that was from the Common Core. So anything else, Sarah, question-wise, before we move on? As they're on
No,
the
I think we show them 4 and 5 now.
Okay. All right. So Keenan, why don't we hop on over and show them 4. And again, level 3, fine. You might even pick something from level 3 and a level 5, or you might pick something less. And so again, there's not a right or wrong. It's just that you have to clarify what quality is for you. So here's the biggest difference in a level 4. This for me is where you have taken the time to do blue equals new learning, both in content and skills. So when I work with schools and districts and dioceses, we usually do the content pieces first across the grade levels. And then I start with the lower grade levels and we build the skills then as we go. All right. So again, if you pull up just a little bit, Keenan, and show a little bit more of the content, you'll see very quickly, notice nothing new in, stop there for a second, nothing new in data collection as far as the content goes. As far as the content goes, right? Nothing new. In data representation, there is some new things. This whole idea of a scaled interval, right? And we're letting you even know. And also brand new in data representation is this idea of the data transfer. So have to be aware of that. But now if you scroll down, you'll see, oh my gosh, 2-step word problems. Never had that before, right? So again, as a teacher, extremely helpful. Okay, collapse that up for just a second, Keenan. And again, skills, what you're gonna notice is now Keenan also has those done individually, but you wouldn't have to. You can still keep it in one whole one, but you'll notice the blue really quickly. We know what's new. So if you want to scroll down a little bit, we're gonna see some blue, black, and then eventually we're gonna hit one that's all blue. Okay, so kind of scroll on down, surprise, surprise, surprise. There you go. So data display transferring, never been asked of them before. How do I know? It's all in blue. So then the last thing I just want to show you is if you collapse that and just the assessments, the only thing that's new on the assessment piece is we've also done a little bit about the evaluation. Where's the evaluation? Teacher observation and a rubric, student peer observation and feedback. So we have different ways we can actually show the evaluation process. So that's also included. And then there also is within the skills, an ability to do I call these little mini headers that just kind of show again what the content is. So then just to wrap up, if you want to go to the uber planet of quality, and I'm not saying you anyway have to, is something that I enjoy doing with, especially with, I find that if they've already had maps and they're wanting to improve their maps, on a level 5, examples get started. So if you want to just collapse down to the skills, I call these mini PDs. And so so look at the first skill. So there's a little, almost like a story for the teacher. So Sophie and her group's task is to create a line plot. They will include scaled measurements, including 0.5, 1/2 centimeters. They brainstorm their ideas for their current science project. Because the other thing we're trying to get teachers to realize is this isn't all in isolation. Matter of fact, I don't even want to see the skills all taught in isolation in my lesson plans. I want to bundle things together. Once we know these skills, oh, we can do A1, B2, and C3 all at the same time. In our lessons, we want to bundle. But this actually has some examples in it. And then if you scroll down just a little farther, Keenan, there's another example I just kind of want to show them, but the stories kind of keep going. And scroll down to, I think it's going to be in the B section. Or no, it's going to be in the C. Yeah, here it is. So, yep. So can you scroll up just a little bit for me, please? No, picture graph. Oh, keep going down. Sorry. I think it's gonna be there it is, B5. So in B5, everyone, notice that creating a bar graph isn't necessarily new. But the scaled piece is. But I find a lot of teachers confuse proper bar graphs and scaled bar graphs. So this even has an attachment. It says, important teacher note, be sure that they're doing proper bar graphs. So a teacher can click on that particular PDF. And so again, no one has to be around to explain it, but it tells them this is the proper way to create a bar graph, scaled or otherwise, and gives some information about where there's the confusion. A lot of people think that's a bar graph that has the X, but it's really a histogram, but that's not even really what you see a histogram either. So let somebody know. So it's great at this level, level 5, you can even get sort of a, I call it mini professional developments or mini professional learnings right into your map. So that's the idea of a level 4 and a level 5. But again, you can mix and match some of these expectations. You just got to figure out what's right. My biggest request is that you create intra-alignment within the unit. No guessing on what content, skills, assessments, and standards go together. That's what I'm most concerned about with the protocols. So with that, we'll just see, because of time, any questions, Sarah? And if not, then I'm going to have Keenan show a little connection, because I know some people that are watching do use Chalk, and so I want to give them a little idea of how they can even connect Planboard to their maps. So anybody have any questions that you want to share?
Yeah, we do have 2 quick questions.
Okay.
Someone says, just a clarification on the blue text and black text suggestion that you have. They say, so if they're creating a pre-K curriculum map, would she start with black text there and then K would be blue, or would K
Bingo.
still be black?
Nope, that's exactly right. If you have a pre-K in your school environment, pre-K becomes black, and then kindergarten would get the blue, just like everybody else does above. Yep, great question.
Mm-hmm. And then one quick question here. They say, I have completed curriculum statements for 30 years. How is curriculum mapping different from those yearly statements that she would finish at the end of each school year?
Okay, so because I have no context of what her yearly statements look like, I wish I could give her an answer right now, but I can't. The idea is that these skills are, again, the more narrowed down learning expectations. So if I think of it like an idea of a ladder, we have sort of ladder with rungs. And so when we climb that ladder, at the top ladder rung, we can do, I'm guessing, kind of her expectations, but I'm not sure. And those skills kind of get us to them. So, but she's more than welcome to contact me afterwards so I can really help her, because I can't see that. But what I find is a lot of teachers ask, like, well, I'm writing learning objectives from the standard, so why do I have to write skills? Well, it's probably because the way you're writing your learning objectives, it could be thought of as a skill, right? So a lot of it, again, is back to that language. What are we saying is the communicative definition of what we're asking of our teachers? So I think that it's a valid question, without a doubt.
Sounds good. I think
Good.
we got some more questions coming in, but I think we'll get to them. We'll keep the ball rolling for now.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
Keenan, can you just show real quick an example of, like, why would it be worth to make the little kind of skills separate and the assessment separate using your
Absolutely.
plan, which is your lesson?
And one of the questions here was about a level 5 assessment. So I'll try and bring that up as well as we're looking at it, just so that we can hopefully get that addressed as well.
Perfect.
So I'm just gonna, as I mentioned, use the level 5 as an example here. And as Janet was kind of talking about when we were going through the examples, you may have noticed when we started getting into the upper end, like the level 4 and the level 5, breaking out the components of, so in this case, we're looking at the skills, and you'll notice each of them is kind of bundled into these little boxes. So we have the codes there, and the color coding with the blue is new. We have these standards linked in there, and really just thinking about this as a bundling of all these pieces around that skill. So I just wanted to bring this up on this page, just so that we're all working from that same context. And when we're looking at right here is on the curriculum map. And one of the things that's unique with Chalk that you can do is take this content that lives in the map and use that in your day-to-day lesson planning. So as a teacher, when you're creating your lesson plans for your students, you're able to use all of your maps and create lesson plans with everything that's been laid out here. So I just wanted to walk through a very quick example of what that would look like. And we'll start here looking at our main dashboard. So when you first coming into the Chalk environment, you would be greeted with this page, and everything we've been looking at so far, all of that has lived within our curriculum space. And this is a shared space for everyone, either across our school or across our district, but everyone's kind of working on those maps in this space. Whereas the Planboard side of the tool is very much the individual lesson planner for each individual teacher. So as a teacher, when you come into Planboard, so I'll just click this option here, you would have your own individual schedule that you've created. You would lay out your classes at the times that they're meeting, and you'd very much have the option to customize this, how your schedule works and the classes that you teach. And in this one, we just tried to keep it simple. We just have our one math class, and we're currently looking at today, Thursday, February 17th. And I just wanted to show how easy it is to pull those resources, that everything we were looking at in that map, so those skills specifically, directly into this context so we can build lessons around it. And also highlight, as Janet was talking about earlier, is you don't necessarily have to have one lesson, one skill. I think we talked about it last week, and I think we're gonna bring it up again, is this idea of like knowing what to cut, right? You can't teach everything. This could take forever. So to get started here, what we're gonna do is directly connect that curriculum map that we were working on to our planner here, so that when we're going in and we're going to create our lesson plans, so obviously we can type in things if we want to, or drop in videos or images or whatever resources. And in addition to all those, we can access our curriculum content. So what I'm pulling up here is the exact same thing we were just looking at. So if I'm looking at skills, for example, and I come in here, I can see all those different skills. So these are actually the exact same, if I quickly toggle back, the exact same skills that we're seeing over here. So it's just a different environment. And in this environment over here in Planboard, we're now able to take those into our planner and build lessons with these. So if we wanted to just quickly go through an example of pulling some of these in, so I can add in the A2 skill into this lesson, and you might see in the background it's getting dropped in there. If we keep scrolling through here, we can add in the A4 skill. In fact, if we don't want to scroll, we know what we're looking for, we can actually use the search option here. So if I wanted to add A6, I can just type that in. And because we've used those codes in our maps, it makes it really easy to go and find what you're looking for. We can drop that in, and then we can also do B5 in this case. And again, the way we've created that and the way we bundled it in our map means that as soon as we add this, it'll pull everything in for us. So that includes any attached instructional materials that we might want to use in creating our lesson plan. And so if I come back to my lesson here, now I have all those skills laid out for me. And I, as a teacher, can now do what I want with this content and really build a lesson with it or restructure it however I see fit. So really just wanted to highlight how those pieces connect to each other when you're creating your maps in Chalk here.
Thanks, Keenan. So just when you kind of pop on back, can you show a level 3 again, just for a second? A level 3.
Oh,
because
sure.
I noticed in the chat, someone said way too much information on the map. I'm like, I'm totally fine with that. Do you know what I mean? Like, in other words, if you think about it, a level 3 to me is like, if you got to a level 3, I'd be thrilled, right? Especially when you get down to thinking about the connection, the intra-alignment. But let's go back to level 2 for a second. If you're someone who's just starting and you're like, this is going to overwhelm our teachers, level 2 is fine, except that I would like it to be a little bit more intra-aligned, right? Again, the assessment's not connected. So we all need to understand what we showed at a level 4 and a level 5 is that kind of advanced mapping, right? But again, I wanted you to understand the quality scale. And there is a purpose and a reason to maybe someday get there, but you could do a level 3 and do your blue fonts and be fine. And that's it. We're not going any higher ever. Matter of fact, I was in a district where the primary grades, they were teaching a subject area that was, they're not experts like the middle school and high school are. And they decided as a task force, they put examples, EGs in the primary grades, but not the middle and high school, because they already know their content so well. So you might even think of it that way. Like, why are we doing this? We're not doing it just because Janet said to do it. It has to be what's right for our school environment. So that's important. So I just want to make sure that someone who wrote that in is like, I'm not trying to overwhelm you and say you have to be a 5 or no. I mean, it's not what we're saying. It's saying, what I'm trying to say is, you need to figure out your protocols and have reasons to why you ask them of your teachers. And so that's what I was showing you in this scale. So let's go back and just see real quickly, any questions that maybe came up, Sarah, before we kind of wrap up this idea that it is a second order change that we are talking about.
Just one quick question. Somebody's asking, is there a suggested alternative color to blue to indicate the new concepts that are being taught here, as blue is typically used for hyperlinks?
That's a great question. No, not necessarily. It doesn't matter to me what color you use. I've always just blue equals new. So it just kind of flows off the mouth well, if you will. If you have tons of hyperlinks, that might be a problem. But again, it doesn't matter the color. Like if your school is you know, red and gold, you know, go Hawks, right? Then make it red. Like the idea is that indicates new learning across grade levels. So it doesn't matter to me what color. It's just, that's what I've stuck with, because I guess in a way I've honored the teachers that made it up, and I like the rhyme. Well, it's not really rhyming, but it works. So that's why. So it could be any color. And I think that's a great question, because this shouldn't be, it has to be done the way Janet Hale just said. I want to spark ideas about, okay, what are you going to do? Because if you really care about the interalignment across the grade levels, and you want to be able to see it like I've shown you on the examples, then you got to figure out what color you are going to use, right? Because it can't be black, right? That's obvious, right? So what color are you going to use? So I would definitely go with your school colors, whatever. Just, I will say this, because Keenan, you and I had conversation about this. Different colors show up better, right? So you don't want to pick yellow, because then no one will be able to read it, right? So
Right.
that piece is totally up to you all. So any other question?
I think we should keep this boat moving along, and
All right, our boats
save some
almost
more
ready
for the
to
next
come into port.
Q&A.
Okay, so where we are now is this idea of exploring just this idea of the idea of the 7-step review process. So again, I'm going to go back to this idea of that this idea of making some decisions systemically, because intra is always just in the map units themselves. So I like to use Heidi Hayes Jacobs' model that she has in Mapping the Big Picture. If you're not familiar with it, it's a 7-step review process. I use part of it, not quite all of it, for when I do the prioritizing of standards, which I told you right now is very, very popular in my world. And we do this through the bullseye prioritizing process. And I don't use step 6 and step 7 in it. So let me just kind of explain to you a little bit just what it looks like. With that said, though, and Keenan, you just actually mentioned it, in today's world, as well as in worlds in the past before COVID, there are too many standards. So what are we going to cut? What are we going to keep? And to what degree? So what I do is bullseye prioritize the standards by first that we need a document to kind of, if you will, collect the data. I'm not sure why it's not coming up totally on my screen, maybe on your screen. But so what I have done over the years is I have all of the standards broken apart, because what seems like one standard is actually sometimes myriad. And so the schools that I work with a lot, I already have some of these already developed, like a Common Core in certain states, and other ones I develop them for them to use. But the idea is that we can't critically look at one standard. We have to see all its parts. So what I do is, first of all, get the data kind of ready, if you will. And then of course the teachers have to know what that's going to actually look like when they're looking at it. So I sort of refer to myself, or whoever does this, as the sort of the data fairy to get it ready. But again, to show you how this looks, all of the standards themselves in totality are done in yellow highlight. But you'll notice if the standard can be broken down, then you'll see it, but it's not yellow highlighted. And we use little Roman numerals, actually. I. We actually use Roman numerals to say this is actually the standard, but now here is the broken apart version that we're looking at. And any place in my document that I create, or if you want to follow the same idea, that where the, oops, can you go back for me, Keenan? Where it can actually be coded, which we're going to talk about the codes we use, it'll have a little box next to it. So what this is showing you is 3 OA A1 and 2 have their own boxes, but notice the 3 doesn't, because it is broken apart, and those will actually be coded. So what happens now is can you go back for me, Keenan, please? Is the teachers for step 2 do something called the first read through. And the first read through means they privately take that document I just showed you and they code all of those standards based on a criteria that I developed based on 3 different models called the bullseye. And so not always, but for some situations such as math, we do a 50, 25, 25, where 50% of those broken apart standards are allowed to be considered critical learning. 25% need to know, and we have a 25% we call still need to know. And again, I can't go into great detail, but each one of these have a different definition of what that really means for us in our district. What's important, though, is that this process is not rushed. The teachers get to do this on their own, and they don't talk to each other, because otherwise the mental model I have is influenced by you because you tell me what I should be thinking. So it has to be done on their own and given enough time. Then what they do is they get together and they reveal their codes. It's done in a small group review. So this is just a quick little snippet of one where 3 teachers at this grade level were doing this. And they went ahead and said, when they all revealed their codes, they all agreed that first one was critical. Not so for the second one, not so for the third, yep for the next one. And they fill one, all pluses. So the idea is they go through this relatively quickly, but then here's what I love. Dialogue, dialogue, dialogue about all these ones they don't agree on. These are all the teachers that teach the same grade level. So what happens is they have to sort of, if you will, duke it out, and they have to come and be ready to come to the large group review with their collective collaborative agreement. So quick example, 40 original standards broken apart on this one grade level turned out to be 138 standards broken apart. Roughly 69, 35, and 35. So when they came to the meeting for our large group review, they had 71, 33, and 34. And we do all this kind of in paper, and eventually we do it in a Google Doc. And then the teachers across the grade level, get ready for this, only look at the dashes across the grade level and see if there's concern about those dashes and if things need to be adjusted per grade level. Because that's already the systemic work done with the standards, we don't need to go on to the next 2 pieces. So in this flow that I showed before we met, this is where that broken apart standard is. So I did this with this math task force K through 12. Then after that is when we did that content listing piece that we just showed you about across the grade levels, doing the math content. I did K5, then I'm at 6-8, then I'm at high school. Then, because we like to start younger and move up, we started with K1 and we, oh, sorry, can you go forward for me, Keenan? We did all of the units of studies, skills, and vocab, K1, built 2, 3, 4, because then our blues continued with our skills. So we really ended up now with a systemically aligned unit of study, and then they started working on their assessments and instruction. So the point here is that the prioritizing the standards is a great piece that can be used for your work systemically. And again, you can use it outside the prioritizing, but that was my example I showed you today. So kind of contemplating where you are, because there's a lot that I've shared, is you just want to remember as you move forward. I know a lot of you are exploring and beginning and kind of readjusting maybe a little bit farther into it, it is a second order change. You're changing how you do business. So one suggestion that I do have in my book is create it can be a council, It can be a cadre. I kind of like this for C words for some reason, or a cabinet. That really is a mixture of administrators and teachers that start making some of these bigger decisions that we're talking about, like what protocols we're going to use, you know, and start really addressing some questions, because we want to see change. We don't want to see confusion, anxiety, frustration, and so on. So the kinds of questions they need to contemplate are, what do we focus on now? Like right now, I'd be like, if I'm starting, we're not doing a level 5, people. I know that for sure. That can come later, maybe 2-3 years down the road. What do we want to focus on now? Like, how about what discipline to start with, right? Because if you start with math, your K-5 teachers or pre-K-5, they're done. They're math. Middle school and high school, you got a math department, but there could be maybe world languages also started. So what are we focusing on now? What are we focusing on later? Who's going to be a part of the decision-making process? Even when it comes to protocols, who's going to do the training, the coaching, who's going to provide? There's all these questions because this is a second order change. So I'm going to say something that's a huge roadblock that I just want to say in this piece. If you have powers to be that are saying maps are the holy grail, we're going to create maps and we want them all done next year, don't even start. Because you'll just have so much, like I showed you a moment ago, the frustration. This is a slow and steady. Remember the tortoise and the hare, slow and steady wins the race. It is a 3 to 5 year implementation process. For example, I'm working with a district right now where we're in year 4. We've got all the core areas done, and we're now bringing in some of the arts, and they've all planned that. And so you want to make sure that you actually do that. So to kind of just wrap up our time together, we just want to make sure that my screen's not going forward. Oh, it's going backwards. Oh.
Sorry, it jumped around a lot on my end. Just give it a
Yeah.
sec. We're on the.
There we go.
Here,
So
let
can you go back
me.
one? Yeah. So to kind of wrap up, you need to realize that you're going to have some roses, thorns, and bud experiences as you move forward. So just to kind of wrap up today, just to give us some thought, myself and those that are participating, what did you find today was a little rose moment? Maybe what was a thorn? And then what is a possible bud that we can kind of conclude with today, just to hear your thoughts before we wrap up. So just go ahead and put that in the chat if you want to just go forward, Keenan, one. I'm just kind of curious because there is a lot. When you start looking through those binoculars and all these components, it's quite different than the mountaintop experience. And so we have to really be thinking about very strategically, what do we want to work on now? What do we want to work on later? And how do we want to make that happen? So I'd love to hear your rose, your thorn, or your bud. So just when you put in your chat, just put an R, a T, or a B, or rose, thorn, bud. And you don't have to do all 3. We just want to kind of hear where your minds are. And then we'll just see, Sarah, real quick, if we have anybody that has any Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good. I think based on the chats that we've had throughout this webinar, a rose is definitely that blue text. A lot of people had resonated with that as we're going.
Good.
So here's coming through. A bud, love the affirmation on slow and steady.
Yep.
Another rose, this is a multi-year process. Shout out to Keenan, I guess, because Rose is the chalk platform.
And thank you to Keenan for being a great Vanna White. Thank you so much.
Here's another Rose. Some of the things we are starting to do with our new curriculum committee is on track. That's always exciting to have that.
Oh yeah, I want to be
affirmation
affirmed.
there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. A thorn, higher level, wanting to get everything done next year.
Yeah.
Reminder that slow and steady wins the race. And here's another rose. We formed a curriculum cadre this year to start learning about curriculum mapping. Appreciate the reinforcement because slow and steady.
Great, that's good to hear. Okay, we'll take like 1 or 2, and then just if there's any Q&A, Sarah, because I know everyone's busy with life, then we can wrap it up.
Absolutely, we definitely got some questions coming in.
Okay.
Someone would like to know which one of your books you recommend starting with.
So, well, thank you for even considering that. So both books, actually what happened was when I wrote the first book, didn't have enough room for everything, so they had me write the second book. So the second book is really about this idea of, on an administrator level, I call it the green book, the cover wise. It's really a lot on an administrative side about how to make this happen. One of my colleagues and I co-wrote it. He's a superintendent and won all kinds of awards and really understands that world. In the first book, my yellow book, the guide to curriculum mapping, you know, it's about sustaining the process. So it has a lot in there about how all the things that you need to really think about. So if I was going to read one or the other, it's really tough because they both have important information. The sort of the nuts and bolts, I think, are the yellow book, and then the more thinking it more strategically on the administrative side, I think, is the green book. I want to say one caveat though. The book now, amazingly, is 11 years old. And so some things have changed. So for example, and we talked about this in part one, it says in there, you know, working on creating projected diary maps. But nowadays, I don't find anybody doing that. They're either doing that consensus map or essential map level, and then having teachers develop lesson plans to kind of align to that and not actually develop their own map. Now that could be different in a school where the teachers are very independent and want their own. But my point is, there's some things have changed. And the other thing I also want to say, Sarah, is I wrote the book very generically. As with that scale that you're going to be sending out to everybody, it says at the top, I personalize everything for the district or school or diocese I work with, because everyone's a unique situation. But I think as an overall, it's a great book to help you get started, either one.
Great. So I'm reading ahead, definitely.
Yeah.
And then here's a clarification question. They're asking if they should start with, when they're starting curriculum mapping, if they should move to interalignment and then for intra-alignment.
Okay, great question. I think you need to do intra-alignment absolutely first, foremost, in the sense of when we write these units of study, what are we going to expect it to look like? The question on the inter is then, when we know what we want things to look like, do we want to take the time to figure that out as part of our journey in writing them? So it's really, you could do both, but without a doubt, if you're going to do one or the other, the one is the intra-alignment, because that's going to, because you want to make sure that these map units that the teachers or whomever is creating are truly quality, where somebody who didn't develop writing them and can read them and know what's aligned with what. Okay, probably time for one more.
I think so. This
Okay.
one's looking for some advice. So she says she's in a K-8 private school that's divided into 3 divisions. She's having trouble convincing the head of the school and the head of that upper division that all of the divisions need to participate in the mapping process. The upper division feels that they have a system that works and don't need to curriculum map. How would you recommend they engage to show them the benefits of getting everyone aligned?
Okay, so we sometimes call them early adopters. And I think I heard it was the lower that is interested in doing it. It's the upper who's currently not, right? Am I correct in what you said? Okay. Remember I talked about, like, we like to start with the lower and move up. Perfect. You start with your lower environment, pre-K up to 3rd grade. You begin the process, and pretty soon they might start noticing and like, wait a minute, that's actually kind of cool. That's helping. And so I don't think you have to go all the way up to get started. I think you can start with your lower group and then move up from there. And they might find that it actually is something they want to do. I think, and another piece I would love to have a conversation with is, well, what are they doing in the upper grades that they think is working well, right? So I'd like to have some conversation to really, because I can't answer without knowing that. But I still say you can start with your lower school and start with them. And then kind of like, if you will, kind of interconnect that part of the grove and then ask the other grove to link in when and if they're ready. Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that wraps up our questions for today's session.
Okay. So I just want to do a real quick shout out, because I know it's part 2 ending here. I thank you so much to all of you who participated today, as well as our part 1. I just thank you so much. As you know, I love dogs, so I just love this picture. I feel like you put me in your backpack and I'm kind of been walking on that mountain with you. And that was such an honor for me to be a part of your journey. And thank you. A big shout out to Sarah, to you, and to Keenan. Just been wonderful to work with. And so I am just so excited to hear about your journeys. And as you can see on the screen, lots of ways to get a hold of me. And again, I just so appreciate this time we've had together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet. We can just skip to the next slide. I just want to say, yes, thank you, Janet. Like, this has been fantastic. I think we've all learned so much from today's session and this two-part series as a whole as well. And thank you so much to everyone who took time out of your very busy schedules as educators and joined us for these sessions. If you're interested in learning more about Chalk, feel free to visit us at chalk.com/demo. We'd be happy to show you how we can help you with your curriculum initiatives. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.